Hello, everybody, and welcome to Level the Field Leadership. My name is Dr. Rachel Gallardo, and I am, as always, very thankful that you've decided to tune into this episode. And obviously, there was something about the title that kind of clicked and resonated with you, and so hopefully, it fulfills what you hope it will fulfill. I do believe that we have challenges that are going to pop up in the workplace, either externally from people on our team or with customers, or internally within ourselves. And ultimately, if we don't have the right tools in place to correct those issues, it can cause workplace burnout. It can cause fatigue, all of that. And it does have an impact on us. It impacts our team. It impacts us as, parents, as spouses, as siblings, as insert whatever relationship dynamic you want to include here. So I'm very thankful that you're here today, and I hope that the information that I talk about can maybe help give you some clarity with whatever might be going on. I do try to post a new episode on the second and the fourth Tuesday of the month. So if this is not your first episode, thank you for coming back. Thank you for encouraging me and motivating me and inspiring me. You do that more than I have the words to express. So I'm super thankful. If you're new here, I just want to say welcome. And if anything I have to say today resonates with you, then maybe you'll consider subscribing to wherever you're happening to listen to the sound of my voice. That way you can get this content and information as well. Remember, I am out on YouTube. So if you want to see all of the hand gestures and things like that, feel free to go check me out over there. And that's at Rachel Level the Field Leadership. If you do a Google search, it'll come up, not a problem. But if you're doing one thing different every single month, then by the end of the year, you will have done 12 things differently. So we shouldn't be the same person now that we are a year from now. So I just want to throw that out there as a challenge for you. Maybe you can decide to do things a little bit differently by the time the end of the year rolls around. For those of you that are not new to the situation that we have going on here, I like to base everything off of a scripture, and I came across this one, and it really, anytime I read it, it just kind of takes me back. And then this last time that I read it kind of made more sense. Like, I guess it just hit a little bit differently. And it says Proverbs 19:24, a sluggard buries his hand in the dish. He will not even bring it back to his mouth. And I always just kind of assumed that this person was just super lazy and didn't want to do anything. But more recently, whenever I kind of came across it, just because of some other things that I'm researching and thinking about and kind of looking into, I really thought about this idea of apathy. So maybe they're not necessarily lazy. It's just that drive, that motivation to do something, it's like it says, to bring his hand back to his mouth. Maybe that's the part that's missing. And so I kind of went down this rabbit hole of apathy, and now here we are. So I want to talk a little bit about what apathy is and kind of give us a little bit of a historical perspective on what apathy is and how we got to the meaning of apathy today. So really, when we talk about apathy, there are three different dimensions to this particular item. The first one is behavioral. So there's that whole lack of self-initiation. You just don't have the ability to engage. That intrinsic motivation is shut off. The extrinsic motivation doesn't even register with you at all. And so you have the physical ability to do something, but you just lack that internal motor that will really just kind of fire to get started. It's kind of like somebody took the spark plug out of your engine in your car. And so you just, every time you turn the key, there's nothing happening because nothing's firing. The same thing is true when we talk about apathy from a behavioral standpoint. So how this looks like in the workplace is that you have emails that you need to get to, but you just can't even find the motivation to open up Outlook. Like there's no desire for you to even click on that little button to even see what's going on. You have a project that you need to work on. You know that deadline is looming, but you just feel stuck. And all of these other little things seem more important or something that you would rather do instead of actually working on that project. Or maybe it's a conversation that you need to have. You know that you need to talk to this person. You know that it's impacting your team. You know that it's impacting your leadership. But just the idea of sitting down and talking with that person, there's no internal switch to say, okay, let me get this scheduled so we can get it over and done with. So that's the behavioral component of apathy. That's kind of what it looks like in the work environment. The second dimension of apathy is the affective component of it. So when we talk about affective, we're talking about your lack of emotional response. So there's the behavioral component of it, and then there's the emotional component of it. And this is where good news doesn't make you happy. Bad news doesn't really make you sad. You're just kind of flat. So it doesn't matter what your team does. It doesn't matter what kind of feedback the customer gives you, whether they're screaming in your face or singing your praises from the hilltop, your response is, okay. There's a Saturday Night Live skit that Pete Davidson did, and it was with Chad. And if you've ever watched Saturday Night Live, I think you know where I'm going with this. But literally, any relationship he was in, Chad's response to everything was, okay, okay. Like it didn't phase him at all. Now, with Chad, I think that there were some other things that were going on. I don't think that's apathy, but whenever we talk about the effectiveness of apathy and from an emotional standpoint of apathy, that's what I mean by that whole flat, okay, like just nothing phases you. You're not touched whenever from an emotional standpoint whenever things occur. So there's the behavioral component, there's just no self-initiation, there's the affective component of it, so there's lack, you have no emotional response at all. And then finally, there's the cognitive component of it. So these are the thoughts that are going on, which in my opinion is the biggest distance that we have, which is between our ears, because it is amazing how much can happen in that short little area of time. But whenever we talk about the cognitive dimension of apathy, this means that we have lost an interest in learning anything new. We've lost an interest in developing ourselves. We don't want to watch or learn any new thing. We're not curious about things anymore. So your curiosity completely and totally shuts down. You stop going to those professional development functions. You stop going to those conferences. You no longer want to keep reading that book on self-fulfillment or time management or leadership. And instead, it's like, you know what? I'm just going to watch another rerun of Friends. It's fine. So we have these different things that are happening in our brains where the thought of learning anything new or being excited about developing ourselves in any way or learning a new program, that you could have something that's being implemented at your workforce that right now is optional. And you're just like, yeah, I'm not going to worry about that. Like, I don't care. I'm just not doing that anymore. So that's how you know that if you've got all three of those elements at play in that very specifically framed, that dynamic, then that's how you know that apathy is likely at stake. Now, I want to touch base a little bit because some of you might be thinking, well, how do I know if it's really apathy or depression? And so, first and foremost, I want to make sure that I state abundantly clear that I am not a clinical psychologist. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. So, I don't have a license to practice like clinical therapy or anything like that. But I do have a solid understanding of depression because to have the degree that I have, you have to know these things, right? But I'm not a clinical psychologist. So if you do feel like you are having feelings of depression, if you feel like you're wanting to engage in self-harm, I implore you to seek help. I can't help you as a patient, so don't contact me for that part of it. But if you're having a hard time finding somebody that you think is reliable, I do know plenty of people that are practicing clinical psychologists and are specialized in this particular area. So if you do reach out to me and say, hey, can you recommend anybody? I can at least give you a couple of names and then you can go from there. So if you are having those feelings, I do encourage you to reach out and get help. Depression is real. And life is too short to stay that way, and you're too valuable to stay that way. So make sure that you seek help. So how do we know if what we're dealing with is apathy or if it's depression? So the difference whenever we talk about depression is that depression is going to carry with it negative emotions. So overwhelming sense of sadness, overwhelming sense of guilt, hopelessness, self-loathing. There could be thoughts of self-harm. There could be thoughts of, well, there's really no point in me staying here anymore, and my family would be better off without me. Like that, all of those are key indications of depression. Whereas apathy is actually the absence of emotion. So if you have like strong negative emotions, that is more likely to be depression. But apathy is not having any sort of emotion at all. So you're not sad about your situation. And quite frankly, you don't care enough to try to do anything about it to change it. So this can manifest itself like if a leader knows that half of their team is not doing their job, they could do the performance evaluations to tell them to get better, but they choose not to. They could coach their team, but they choose not to. And they don't even want to fire people that aren't even doing their job. Like all of those kind of um, leans more towards somebody having apathy, not necessarily depression. So There is a stark difference, and it's important to kind of understand those differences. And here in a minute, I'm going to talk about kind of the common causes of apathy, and I'm also going to give you some pointers on what you can do to maybe try to reignite the fire, maybe get that spark plug back into your motor. So before I do that, though, I want to kind of take us on a little bit of a historical journey of apathy, and this will be super short. So if you're not a history person, skip ahead about 2 minutes because then we'll be on to the other stuff. But apathy, if you think about it, the Stoics back in the day, I mean, we're talking like Marcus Aurelius and Plato, Socrates, that sort of thing. They actually thought that apathy was a virtue because according to them, if you were apathetic towards a situation, then that freed you from these unruly passions that could get in your way of making progress. Because sometimes if you're overly emotional, then you can be irrational. And so that can cause you to do things that you would later regret. So if you remain apathetic, according to them, that helps you to remain logical and actually is going to help with your decision making. If you look at it from a theological standpoint, so spiritual traditions would sometimes describe this person as being like a spiritual sloth. The Bible itself, it talks about a person becomes lukewarm and loses their zeal for life and divine purpose because you're just kind of going through the motions. You don't really have any sort of emotions about anything. You're not doing things to try to make progress, and your thinking in your mind is, well, there's really no point in me doing this, right? So when we talk about apathy, the Stoics said it was actually a really good thing, but from a theological or religious standpoint, there are plenty of religions that say, you do have to be excited about something, because if not, then you're just kind of going through the motions. Modern day, we're kind of torn. If you look at it from a socio and cultural perspective, we want people to be a lot more logical, but at the same time, we criticize them if they don't show emotions, right? So if somebody is very flat or deadpan, then we're like, what's wrong with you? But then if they're overly emotional, we criticize them as well. So from a societal standpoint, I think we're definitely sending like mixed messages on what is or is not appropriate. We want people to seem engaged and motivated and excited at work. But if you come at me at 8 a.m. with that much cheer before I've had my coffee, like, we're going to have a problem, right? So we have to find that balance. And if you look at apathy, it's more about how the person is across a period of time, not necessarily we take just a snapshot image of how somebody happens to be reacting or behaving in a 15-minute period, right? So what are some of the causes? I wanted to throw in that historical reference because I think it's important. Just the evolution of how we think about things over time, I think, is very fascinating. But to give you an idea of where we're at right now, I think it's important too. But again, what are some of the causes of apathy? Where in the world does this come from? So there can be three different places that we can focus on, and there are others as well. But based on some of the digging that I did and some of the research I came across, it seems like there are three that actually are your biggest that can cause apathy. The first is just flat out burnout. So you have been overwhelmed for way too long. Your brain is just totally checked out. And it's not necessarily your brain's fault, okay? Your brain has chosen to kind of dim the lights because it's in protection mode. It's like, I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And so if I can emotionally detach myself from what is going on, then I don't have to deal with this issue because I've got other issues happening that I need to deal with. It helps me to not be full of reaction because I have to kind of triage from a cognitive load standpoint what I can and can't handle. And because a person's brain that is burned out just can't handle a lot of things, there's just a lot of things that they don't react to from an emotional standpoint. So that's one item. Burnout might actually be causing the person to be apathetic. The second reason the person might be apathetic is just strictly neurological factors. So your brain is constantly changing. It's doing a lot of changing up until the time you're about 25, 26, 27 years old, depending upon the person, depending upon gender, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, your brain is in this kind of evolutionary process. And so depending upon what changes happen, particularly in the frontal lobe, which is right behind your forehead, depending upon the changes that happen there, that can kind of cause triggering to these different states. Any hormonal fluctuations may cause it. If you've had disruptions to your nervous system, that might cause it as well. So there's a biological component here. There's definitely a neurological component at work. And so that might be causing some of these apathy things to occur. And then finally, like I said, you've got burnout, you've got your neurological factors. And then finally, the last one that can be a big cause of apathy is just straight up the environment that you're in. Who do you surround yourself with? What is going on in your environment? What are you listening to? What music are you listening to? What podcasts? What movies are you watching? Because quite frankly, the environment that you're in can actually cause you to develop what is called learned helplessness. And so it's this idea of, well, it doesn't matter what I do, the environment that I'm in, because I've been conditioned to believe that. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It just, that's what you've been taught to believe. I know that nothing is going to change. So why can I get upset about it whenever, there's really no point, nothing's going to change, nothing's ever going to be any different. And they've actually done studies where dogs, they were in this cage. I know if you're a dog lover like me, it sucks. I wish that they'd use another animal, but it is what it is. And they basically put these dogs in these cages that had these shocks that the dogs would receive. And so over time, the dogs just kind of got used to always getting the shocks, so much so that whenever they lifted up the gate for the dogs to be able to leave the cage, they just continued to lay there. They had just accepted their fate. It's a learned helplessness situation. This is my life. I just have to deal with it. And that's just simply not true. I believe that you can change any part of your life that you want to at any time, at any age. If you want to go back to school at 50 years old and do something else, then go do that. If you want to go open the bakery shop at 20, then go do that too. Like, you don't have to stay in the current environment that you're in. It might be hard, it might be difficult, it might take time for you to make that change, but it's so much better for you to make those changes and to start doing those baby steps that are eventually going to get you to your goal than to stay stagnant and to stay in that environment that you're just not content in. So, how do you overcome this state of apathy? If you've been listening to this and you're like, okay, I think I'm in an apathetic state, I don't want to stay here, but I have zero concept of how to get out of it, I'm going to give you three options to consider. One might work for you one day, none of them might work for you at all. There are other things that you can do. So if there's something that I've said that really kind of resonates with you, then do some digging on your own and kind of see what you can find out. But whenever we talk about apathy, you've got to give yourself a little bit of grace to make small changes that will eventually turn into bigger changes. And so that's what kind of the basis of these three things are. So, first and foremost, you can try the 2 minute rule. If the task takes you less than 2 minutes to do, then just do it right then and there. Respond to one email, schedule that one client meeting, return that one phone call, do 5 minutes of fixing this particular item on the spreadsheet. Like, don't let it linger any more than that. If it takes you less than 2 minutes to do it, then just freaking do it. Because the goal isn't necessarily the task. It's not to say that you can check this thing off your to-do list. The goal is to prove to your brain that you are capable of initiating action. So remember what we talked about before, how your brain is just kind of in that stagnant mode and it doesn't feel like it can do anything. That 2 minute task helps rewire and reconfirm to your brain that, yes, I am capable of doing something. Let me just, okay, look, I did this thing for 2 minutes. I don't have to worry about that anymore. And you're actually going to give your brain a little bit of a reprieve by taking care of those small kind of nagging things that can just go on. If you're talking about this from a personal perspective, maybe you don't put all of your clothes away, but you're like, okay, I'm going to put away just 3 pieces of clothing. Like, I'm just going to pick these three. I'm going to do this shirt, these pair of pants, and put those shoes back in the closet. And if you want to leave the rest of the clothes, great. Maybe the next day you pick up another 3 things, or 2 hours from there you come back and say, okay, I'm going to do 4 pieces of clothing. It's the little teeny tiny things that you're confirming to your brain that you are capable of initiating action and that you're not stuck. So that's the 2 minute rule. That's option one. Option two, you got to find the cheap dopamine and learn how to turn it off. So and I'll throw myself into that mixture as well. We have these little things that are called, or I've heard called, dopamine drops. And they're little, just kind of like a dripping faucet. They're these little things that kind of give us a little bit of dopamine rush throughout the day, whether that's going out to social media and scrolling through things, or maybe we're playing a game on our phone, or maybe it's that, hit of chocolate that we have. It's like these little pieces of dopamine that just kind of get dumped into our brain. Um, And the problem with this is that the reward center in your brain gets bored because it's used to you constantly getting those little dopamine rushes, those little drops of excitement throughout the day. Like, oh, we're going out to social media. Oh, I did my Facebook. Oh, I did Instagram. Now I'm going out to X. Now I'm going out to TikTok. Now I'm doing Snapchat. Like, and so you're giving your brain all these little hits throughout the day that whenever it's time to actually sit down and do something, your brain overly assumes just how terrible and awful and boring it's going to be because you're not getting a dopamine drip from responding to a client email, or at least most of the time you're not, right? There's no dopamine drip from washing the dishes. Like, I mean, maybe a little bit at the end when there's a sense of accomplishment, but it doesn't quite have the same impact as that funny Instagram video, right? And so again, we have to rewire our brain a little bit. We have to shift what it is that we look at. So for even if it's just for an hour a day or 30 minutes a day, make your brain understand that the boring tasks are really not that bad. And it's actually going to increase your motivation to do them. So for an hour a day, you don't do any social media. Maybe you can schedule it on your phone because they do have the ability to do that now. Where during certain windows of time there is no social media, or even if you've just changed the settings so that way you can track how much time you're spending on each of your apps, you might see, okay, well, I've been doing X number of hours this week. Next week, I'm going to try to do just a little bit less, and maybe you dwindle it down so that way your brain is not constantly dependent upon this dopamine dump. Part of the reason why we don't get excited about things anymore is because we think we should always be excited. And that's just simply not realistic. Our brains have not evolved as fast as technology has. And so a lot of people are having to deal with the effects of it because our brains are still trying to get caught up to what is going on in our life. So maybe you find that dopamine drip, you find that place that's maybe sucking more mental dopamine, more mental excitement out of your life than it should be. So that way, whenever you do these other tasks, they're not so bad. So that's my second recommendation. And then my third recommendation, this one is super simple. Just reconnect your values. So this one doesn't require you to get up and do anything. This one simply asks for you to ask yourself the 5 whys. And for me, this was really a game changer. I had a close colleague, a close still mentor today, that actually mentioned this. If we can remember what our values are, that's a good way to trigger us to get up and take action and try to push that apathy aside. So whenever you go to do something, you ask yourself, well, why? Why am I doing this one thing? And then you answer your question. And then why am I doing this next thing? And then you answer that question. And by the time you get to the 5th why, your core value will emerge. So, and I'm just going to do this off the cuff, so we'll see how this goes. Rachel, why are you doing the laundry? Well, because the clothes are dirty. Okay, well, why is it important for you for the clothes to be clean? Because I don't want my family to wear dirty clothes. Okay, why is that important to you? Because I show my family how much I care for them by doing laundry, and I don't want for other people to make fun of them or whatever. Okay, well, why is that important? Like, and you keep going all the way down, and ultimately, my 5th why gears down to my love language. Because for me, active service is the way that I show love. Doing things for the people that I care about is how I show love. And so I want to make sure that they know how much I care for them by doing things for them, removing something from their plate. Now, granted, my son is only about 9 months old, so, he needs a lot of things done for him. But if there's one less thing that my husband has to worry about, then that's what I want to be able to do, right? It connects to my core values. And you can do this for anything. Why do we use this particular hiring matrix to try to find candidates, and then answer that? And by the time you get to your 5th why, if that answer to that why doesn't align with the company's mission, vision, and values, then you need to go back to square one and change how you're hiring and recruiting for candidates. So those are the 3 things that you can do. You can do the 2-minute rule for, what, if takes me less than 2 minutes, I'm just going to get it done. You can turn off the dopamine drip, wherever that might be coming from, or you can do the 5 whys. And any of these should put you on the path to help you overcome any issues of apathy. If it is a progressing issue and it's something that happens long term, then you do want to get it addressed. look and see if there is something going on from a burnout perspective. And as always, make sure that you're eating properly, that you're getting enough sleep, that you're drinking water, because all those physiological functions within our body, they need to be operating at their most optimal if we are to sustain and be our best selves as well. So ultimately, I hope this information is giving you some clarity about apathy and how to overcome it, or what else might be going on if you're feeling like you're dealing with something from an emotional or mental standpoint. Maybe you were thinking of somebody else. Maybe you've seen some of these behaviors, or they've made little comments like, "Oh, I can't kickstart myself. I can't get the motivation." Feel free to share this information with that person as well. I don't get paid for any of these episodes, so it really, I mean, I would love for you to share it just for the sake of sharing it, but don't think, well, I'm not going to share it because, I'm not going to give her money. I'm not getting any money. I enjoy doing this because I enjoy doing it. But quite frankly, this information might be the jumpstart that they need. Maybe they hadn't thought of doing the 5 whys, and that change of doing the 5 whys helps decrease that apathetic state so they can re-engage and actually start to enjoy their job. So I hope this information was helpful for you. If you liked what you heard, please click the subscribe button, share it with others, send me a comment, send me a message, let me know what you think about this episode. If you come across any research that maybe contradicts some of this, or is something that you think I might be interested in, feel free to share that with me as well. You can find me on all of the socials. That all of that information is in the show notes. But ultimately, I hope you guys take care of yourself, take care of your team. I know that you can 1000% do this. And until next time.